this is so wonderful to be here with Thema this morning. This is just such a thrill to be able to introduce you to our audience, because when you work with the energy, there's no way you can draw a line and say, well, I'm just working on the body. You work on the mind, on the spirit, on the trauma, on the everything, on your relationships. So you're just a perfect person to come along and be with us.
Oh, thank you so much. I am so excited to be here with you all, both for this mini conversation and really excited about the summit.
Yay.
So Dr. Bryant, who also goes by Dr. Thema, who we are now intimate enough to call Thema, has just an unbelievable background. I mean, her doctorate in clinical psychology was at Duke University. Then her postdoctoral was at Harvard, where she worked with the Victims of Violence program. And then she went on to Princeton, and she did the SHARE program, which involved sexual assault and sexual harassment and harassment of any kind of sexual orientation. And now she's a full professor tenured at Pepperdine, where she runs the Culture and Trauma Research Center. And so you couldn't have better credentials than that. And she also just was elected as president of the American Psychological Association, which has 121,000 psychologists and students and researchers. And it's the most powerful mental health organization in the world, as far as I'm concerned. I've been a member for 50 years. And one of my really good friends from way back, he's edited my work. I've published in his book, and he ran against Dr. Bryant for her presidency.
Who was that?
And and they just had the American Psychological Association conference, and he wrote to me and said, there is a sea change in the American Psychological Association. It is getting more diverse. It is getting more humanistic. It is getting more holistic. And Dr. Bryant is a big part of that. So but then, in addition to all those credentials, she's got this other dimension to her that is just as significant. And that is that she is she has a master's in theology. She is an elder of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and she brings art and dance and poetry into this awakening the spirit, into bringing the spirit. And so she just, for our community, she is just perfectly designed.
Perfect.
And what we, and her, as a psychologist, her specialty really is working with the aftermath of trauma in all dimensions. And we asked her if she could come in to teach our energy medicine healers who are working primarily with the body. That's of course, they're always working with body, mind, spirit, but the symptoms that are brought to them usually are of the body. And if they've been traumatized, that may not be what they're presenting. So what do our practitioners need to know about trauma to really work effectively as energy healers? So Dr. Bryant, tell us what you're going to tell us.
Yes, absolutely. I am so excited to be with you all in a few weeks. And I do this work not only as a trauma psychologist, but also as a trauma survivor. And so I understand intimately what it is to be overwhelmed in the body, what it means to hold yourself tightly, what it means to not breathe deeply, to be in survival mode, to be triggered, to know what it is to be in panic. And so many of those that you serve And because we know how pervasive trauma is, I would also say that many of you are also trauma survivors, and we're all living through this global pandemic, right? So we have all been exposed to varying degrees. And so trauma both affects the body because it disrupts the nervous system, and the body can also be a site and a vehicle for the healing. And so what I'll be describing is the ways in which the impact of trauma can show up, what you might notice in terms of the ways in which people are holding themselves, the way they are responding, the questions they may or may not be asking. And so that whole piece of the body tells the story, the body keeps the score. It is in there, even when people say, I'm over it, I'm not thinking about it. It shows up in some ways with somatic complaints. And so migraines and nausea, and a big one is backache, right? We have so much backache. It's like, what is it that people are carrying? And so what it means to try to release that, but then also the ways in which the body is a wonderful place by which, and a necessary place by which we heal, by which we restore. I like to use the term homecoming, to come back home to yourself. Many people are not comfortable within themselves. And so breath, movement, dance, and bodily awareness help us to reclaim ourselves.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean, you just can see how that interfaces with energy work. It is energy work,
is
all
energy.
those things.
Yeah,
Dance, movement,
that's right.
song.
I love
Yeah.
it.
Right, yeah. And indigenous healers will, when they're doing an intake, those initial questions of trying to figure out what the issue is, they'll ask, when is the last time you sang? When did you stop dancing? When did you stop finding yourself in the art of story? You know, so we know that
Yeah.
storytelling, music, and dance. And a part of therapy is, we call it narrative therapy, is reauthoring your story. So what's the story I have about my body, right? What is the story I've been told about my body? We also will integrate this issue of culture, because a part of the ways we experience ourselves, even physically, are the messages that we have been told. So the example I often give when we think about girls and women who may have eating disorders or body image, and we know men and those who are non-binary can have it as well. But in particular, when we think about women, if I assume that the distorted thought originated with you, I have missed it, right? We have been bombarded with messages our whole lives about who is beautiful, who is not,
Yeah.
who is desirable, who is not. So that's not just like, oh, some reason you just have a magic, you magically have a negative thought about your body, right? So we have been given these messages. So it requires a resistance to be able to push past all of that, to actually glory in your own being, to see the glory in your own being.
Mm.
I'm really excited for you to be in Cleveland with us. I am really excited knowing just how much our audience will love you. And they already move in all of the realms that you have spoken. I mean, it's just what happens when you start working with energy. So I just think it will be a great support, just what you're saying. And I'm really happy about it.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited as well. And I know, it's a gift to be in the company of people who are doing the healing work. And I know that it'll be, a mutual reciprocity of pouring and receiving. So I'm excited for what I have to share. And I'm also excited about what I will receive in all of the other workshops.
Yes,
That's great.
yes, yay.
Yeah. So one of the really unusual things about the way that you work is the way you combine psychology and art.
Yeah.
And I wonder, just what's the history in your life? Which came first, psychology or art?
Right. So I will say they was a simultaneous birthing. In terms of the psychology part, as I mentioned, my dad, I may not have mentioned it. My father was a pastor. He's retired now. And so people were often calling and coming to meet with him for what they would call pastoral counseling. So I grew up seeing that, and people were always calling our home in crisis or in distress, because most people in our community preferred to speak to a minister than a therapist. And so that was always in my awareness, the importance of bearing witness, right? The importance of who are the people who can sit with your truth, right? Where you can not have to be censored or filtered, where you don't have to hold it together and pretend, but is there a safe space to be undone? And who helps you to put those pieces back together again? So I grew up seeing that, and then, probably as a teenager, discovered that psychology was a field in and of itself, right? And I think that's it. That's for me. And then in terms of the arts, my mother is a love of the arts and got my brother and I into dance class as probably as early as we could walk. My brother did not stick with it, but I continued on the journey, and I'm so glad that I did. I decided it wasn't, that if I had to dance to pay my bills, that might take the joy out of it. So I didn't go into, the realm of being a professional dancer, but I continued to love it. And here in Los Angeles, I lead a children and teens dance group, sacred dance group. And I just love seeing, the young people come alive and expressing themselves is beautiful.
I just want, I don't know if this is an appropriate time to say it, but I want to make sure. I mean, one of my daughters works mostly with little kids. She loves to teach children, and it is a joy to watch. And then my other daughter, we just came back from Estonia, and she taught the children, and it was great. She's come back shocked that she liked it so much.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah,
and talk about trauma. There's a lot of trauma coming into that community because they're so near Ukraine and they're on border Russia. So it was an astonishing thing. So
yeah,
I'm going to make sure you meet my daughters.
I cannot wait. I cannot. Look, we will dance together. Well,
yes. Okay.
Well,
and it's so true. It's so important what you're naming, of people not forgetting the children, because I think sometimes, people say they don't want to talk about hard things in the presence of kids, but the kids are picking it up. They're seeing it, and then they're left to try to figure it out on their own because we're protecting them with our silence. And so important to have those spaces where, the kids can be, directly nourished and addressing the worries and concerns.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for hopping on to this little talk. And I think everyone that's watching can feel our excitement and the reason for our excitement to have Thema gracing our event. That's just a thrill for us. So
it really is.
So much.
It really is.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So
can't wait.
Yes. Once Carrie hits off, we all disappear. So we're going to say goodbye to it. So
all
good.
right.
Goodbye.
Thank you for having me, and see you all soon.
Bye, Thema.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.